How a realist hero rebuilt the kingdom part 2 was a pretty big step back from season 1. Where one I said in season 1 is that one of the best parts of the show is watching how the characters get out of situations. In season 2, they end up taking the stance that the getting out of the situations is very easy and barely an inconvenience. To the point where it feels like a lot of conflicts that come up in season 2 are barely consequential in the first place. At one point in this season, the main character annexes an entire kingdom that he spent several episodes on in season 1 sort of being at war with. He just annexes them off screen in this at one point. And while talking about the reforms he's made to the kingdom, he offhandedly mentions that he eliminated all crime in the city. And these are things that should have whole episodes dedicated to. Both of these things are easily an arc in a better made show that are handled off screen and basically done offhandedly, just made to progress the plot in the quickest way forward without any time or attention to detail paid to the actual actions that's occurring. And I also commented about how, at the very least, although it wasn't the greatest intrigue plot ever, the intrigue was at least entertaining enough in season 1. You can basically throw that out the window, because one of the big cliffhangers in season 1 was the negotiation over the territory after the enemy kingdom's capital had been taken over at the end of season 1. Well, what basically results from that is a conversation where the Empire, which is all bent out of shape about him violating a non-aggression treaty, it just hand waves the whole situation. They just talk and they just agree with him. In fact, that's a pretty consistent thing that happens in this entire season, is that a character will show up and then they'll just agree with him on everything. He gets basically no pushback the entire show. The only time he gets any pushback is when he's trying to find out who in his inner circle are sycophants, and he gets like 2 nobles who are like, I don't like this plan, I want you to not kill these people. And he's like, you 2 are good. And then he kills every other noble in the room. It's one of these, he's also like super overly emotional. And I understand the perspective of being a normal person and having to order the death of a bunch of people, but it really does feel like his emotions just sort of flip on a dime. So he ends up coming off sort of neurotic throughout the course of the show. That's not necessarily a writing issue, but I certainly don't like it. I will say that a writing issue, of course, is the fact that everyone just instantly agrees with him on everything and then just trusts everything he's doing as if he's some sort of perfect genius. It really wears on you as time goes on. And even though he is at least mostly right, I would say, as the series goes on, the fact is it sort of damages suspension of disbelief, because the truth is, in real life, as most people know, everyone isn't always inherently rational and inherently making the best choices for themselves. So he can come in and be like, here's my logic, here's what I think will make sense. And then the person would, like, in real life would be like, fuck you. I don't care. My way or the highway. And, like, if that turns into a conflict, so be it. But that would be a more realistic scenario. So the show is beginning to develop real suspension of disbelief issues. Another thing I praise season 1 for is its sort of subtle handling of the harem that's forming. Throw that out the window too, because at this point, the main character is engaged to like 4 women. He's ended season 1 engaged to just the princess. 4 women are engaged, one of which just showed out of nowhere and is like, I want to marry you. And if the show managed to keep this contained as sort of marriages of political convenience, which is how they're pitched to the main character, that would be totally fine. But then there's an entire episode towards the end of the show which is dedicated to the reveal that all of the women really love him and fell in love with him. One of which is the wildest, because she's been in like 2 episodes with him at this point. I'm exaggerating. It's like 5 or whatever, but they barely have any screen time together. And the fact that the characters have such an emotional attachment to him when the show itself refuses to really spend any real time delving into the characters and allowing them to develop romantic attachments with each other is fucking wild and so poorly handled. Like I said, the only character I can actually see him having a real relationship with is the princess, who continues to be the primary love interest, which I wouldn't have too much of a problem with if it wasn't going out of its way to push that every woman he interacts with is in love with him. It's so it's actually aggravating. It's a very it's a Tenchi Muyo problem, essentially, where they want it to be a harem, and the harem elements are starting to detract from the actual elements of the show that would actually be better. It pivots from season 1's attempt to have a at least pseudo-realistic, mostly power fantasy take on a character using what he has available to him to fix the kingdom, and has gone completely off the cliff and has developed into a pure power fantasy where he's super smart and everything he does is right and all the women love him and he's super sexy and he's a huge hero and everyone's constantly metaphorically sucking his dick all the time and literally wants to physically suck his actual real dick. It gets sort of obnoxious as the show goes on. Honestly, the only reason the show managed to dig itself out of any sort of pit at all is because the last episode was actually pretty solid. And I don't want to get into too many details, but they somehow introduce a time travel plotline to the show, and it adds an interesting little plot thread. The only thing is, I don't think the plot thread that they added with the time travel actually opens up for further discussion. So I'm not sure there's a lot to go on with that, but at the very least, the last episode was good enough to pull it out of a 4 out of 10. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic. Your Envoy of Hope. Bye-bye.